Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the Procore Groundbreak event. My name is Lauren Lake, and I'm the COO and co-founder of Bridget. We are a construction software company, and we are a Procore partner. And today I am joined by Denton Perreault. He is the Director of Technology and Innovation at Descor Builders. And we're going to be having a fireside chat where I ask Denton for his thoughts on innovation, the construction business, and some of the things that Descor has done that are really unique and really stand out as innovative methods within the construction world. So before we get started, I will give a quick background on myself and our company, Bridget, and I'll let Denton give his own background and brief description as well. So I'll get started. So my name, as I said, is Lauren. I am the COO and co-founder of Bridget. My business partner and I, Mallory, we started our company Bridget because we both came from construction families. So we both had grandparents actually in the construction business. I had studied civil engineering in school, so had some exposure through my education as well. And we really saw an opportunity to bring more technology into the construction world, and really started by just going and talking to companies, people in the construction world, and trying to understand what the problems were. And one of the things that came up in doing all of this research was the challenge of workforce planning and workforce management. So we talked to lots of GCs who did this all through Excel spreadsheets. So really trying to manage people and projects and understanding who was going where and when. And it was really difficult to know who was the best fit for a project. How were they keeping that team member engaged and making sure they were working on the right fit role for them? And then ultimately understanding what the utilization rate was. And so that led us to building our product, Bridget Bench, which we launched 2 years ago. And actually that's how we got to know Descor, who started using our product within their business. So that's just a quick background on Bridget, how we came to be in the workforce planning world, and again, working directly with general contractors. So Denton, I'll let you give a quick background on yourself and Descor, and maybe just share a little bit about your history with Descor.
Sure, thanks, Lauren. My name is Denton Perreault. My day job is project manager with Descor Builders, but I also serve as the Director of Technology and Innovation as well. I lead a lot of our, obviously, technology and innovation pursuits as a company. A little bit about my background. I've been with Descor coming up on 10 years now. Been in the construction industry for almost 20. I have a degree in civil engineering as well from UC Davis. And a little bit about Descor Builders. We're a general contractor based out of the Sacramento area in California. We've been around for close to 16 years now. And we have a focus in a variety of market sectors, multifamily, dealerships, healthcare, kind of anything and everything. We'll build it for you.
Awesome. And so today we're going to be talking, as I said, about innovation. Descor is known to be a very innovative builder. And so want to highlight and just ask some questions. It'll be a very casual conversation. Just really want to pick your brain, Denton, about what your thoughts are on the industry and how you've approached innovation as a team at Descor. So can you remind me, how many employees are at Descor?
Last time I checked, we were up to 93 now, 93 employees.
Wow, and I know it's been really fast growth for you at Descor.
It has, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been quite the journey over the last number of years as you've built the business. One of the things in talking to many of your colleagues at Descor that I found was really interesting was some of your, you could call it, innovative approach around talent and how you actually have built your team and allowed your team to scale and grow quite quickly, especially being a smaller GC in a very competitive market in California. And so one thing that's interesting to me is I feel like when we talk about innovation, a lot of the time people have this understanding or thinking that innovation has to mean technology. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. Innovation a lot of the time can be through process or through approach to all sorts of things beyond just the technology solution. So do you mind sharing with me and the audience here just a little bit about how you at Descor think about talent and how you've been able to grow your team with what I understand is a very, very low attrition rate?
Sure, yeah. So I think when we talk about talent, we think about somebody that makes us better as an organization and as a company. And I think there's a combination of factors that go into that. Of course, there's aptitude. That particular person has to obviously show the ability to do their job and know their roles and do it well. But almost as important, if not more important for us in looking at talent, is cultural fit. Something that the underlying kind of factor that drives our business is our PACE values. And those are passion, accountability, commitment, and excellence. And that's really the underlying theme behind everything we do. And so when we talk about talent and we look at talent and we look at fit, that person really has to align culturally with our PACE values. And particularly in the construction industry, construction can essentially be, the ultimate team sport, right? So that person has to be somebody that thrives in a team environment, that looks for collaborative opportunities, and that really wants to kind of be part of almost an extended family, if you will, when they're at work. And so that's kind of how we look at talent.
Yeah, I know in talking to some of the folks at Descor, they were sharing different anecdotes about why they've been at Descor, many of them for many years like yourself, and just what has kept them there, why they feel very attached to Descor and very much a part of the team and very engaged. And some of the anecdotes that people were sharing were around the concept of understanding and valuing people and really putting people first within your business, and really having this sentiment that Descor is not going to burn their employees out with insane hours. People were sharing stories with other companies that they worked at prior to Descor, where they would be putting in 16, 18-hour days, never at home with their family. And a couple of them were sharing with me, even if someone offered me more money, they were saying, no way would I leave Descor, because Descor actually values me and my life. And this idea, I think that it sounds like is pretty well talked about at Descor, is the idea of, you're going to work with us and you're going to be home in time to coach your kids' soccer game and, have dinner with your family, and that sort of mentality. Really feeling like that made a huge difference to how they appreciated and valued their work.
Sure. And yeah, that's absolutely true. And, it sounds simple and maybe a little cliche, but it's really just for us about putting people before profits. And so all those things you mentioned, when our founder started the company, those were foundational things that they took from their previous experience from some of those bigger, larger companies where, maybe you're just considered a number, so to speak. And they really wanted to kind of change that paradigm, if you will, with what a successful construction company could be, but still offer its employees, those opportunities, and give them permission, so to speak, to still have, a very fulfilling personal life. Because sometimes it is considered, well, you can't have both. You can either be successful in construction, but you can't have a personal life, or vice versa. And, we like to think that's not the case whatsoever. And, those simple things like coaching your kids' team and being home for dinner every night, those are very important to us. And, making sure that we're putting people in the right positions, we're putting people on the right projects to where, they're not overly stressed or stretched too far, from their home life. They're still able to do the things that they need to do, so that when they do come to work, they're the best version of themselves. They're fulfilled, they're happy, because that's ultimately what's going to lead to their best performance in the job site too.
No, it makes a ton of sense, and it aligns so nicely with why we built our product, Bridget Bench, which is obviously more of a software tool, but really with that idea of how can people be put first within construction businesses, and really making sure that, what you've done at Descor is something that GCs can be thinking more broadly in terms of really understanding the talent that they have, understanding how to keep those employees engaged, as the talent market right now is so competitive. And, if you can do what you've done at Descor and really make sure you're retaining those those employees, that makes a huge difference to how you can scale up your business and how effective you can be with your employee base.
Absolutely.
It's really similar actually to how we've grown our team at Bridget, because similar to you, we've grown quite quickly and we're a smaller company. And so we have to be thinking differently in order to compete with companies that are much, much bigger than us and have more resources. And so, I think that forces, companies to think a little bit differently or think outside the box in order to compete in a competitive market. And in some ways, it's a little bit sad, I think, to be putting people first innovative. It's probably not necessarily something that should be innovative. It should probably be a bit more commonplace. But at this point in time, I do think it is quite progressive of Descor to be thinking in that way. And definitely in talking to team members of yours, it really shows.
Great.
So we're going to dive into a couple more questions on innovation in the more typical sense. I know you've put a lot of work into defining innovation at Descor and really understanding what that looks like within your business. Can you just share a little bit with us about that? What does innovation look like at Descor? Do you have a way that you've defined that internally? And what did it look like arriving at that definition?
Yeah, so I think, we look at innovation as sort of the next step in the evolution of process improvement, if you will. So they're kind of coupled, yeah, but they are different. So when we look at process improvement, we look at, okay, we have an existing process or an existing workflow that maybe isn't going the best that it could, or maybe it has some pain points, and what tweaks and what, modifications maybe can we make to that process or that workflow to improve it. But the next step to that obviously is innovation. And so we kind of define innovation as just a whole different way of approaching, a solution or finding, a way to resolve problems that we weren't even considering before. And that's where, that's ultimately what led us to Bridget, actually. So, I think listening to you describe, how you guys started, we were your perfect use case. We had
spreadsheets,
3 or 4 different spreadsheets,
yeah.
With different information. None of it talked to each other. And, it worked fine when we were smaller, to be honest with you, because it was manageable. But, as we continued to grow as a company, we continued to scale up, the management of those spreadsheets, what started off on a, kind of maybe a weekly basis, became daily, trying to manage, all those resources and all these projects and, all these moving pieces back and forth. And so that's where we got to a point where it's like, oh, we have this major pain point. How are we going to do this? And then we came upon Bridget, and it was a perfect solution for us.
No, and I mean, we work with lots of companies that have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of employees that are still, using an Excel spreadsheet or maybe P6 type method where it's very manual. So you can imagine, the 93 employees that you have times many times over. It is quite the battle in terms of making sure that is all running as effectively as possible.
Sure.
I know one thing in talking to lots of different folks at different general contractors, one of the challenges that seems to come up when in regards to innovation is just having so many different things on the market, so many different, processes or products that people want to improve or test. Is there anything that you've done to help either prioritize some of these requests, or how does that look within Descor to make sure that you are really, innovating in the areas that make the most sense, and it's not just, these shiny new toys all over the place?
Right. Yeah. So great point. For us, it kind of developed organically, over the last, I'd say 5 years or so, is really when we've kind of been experiencing this really advanced growth as a company. And, kind of where we were back in that 2016, 2017 timeframe, and some of the solutions that we were using and trying to sort of piece things together, we kind of realized ourselves, like, we've got to start taking a look at the way we're doing things, because as we start to grow and our business starts to expand, the projects start to get bigger, the way we're doing things is just not scalable. And so what kind of developed out of that, and organically in a sense, was we put together this this group what we refer to as our Insights and Innovations team. And it's a collection of people within all parts of our business. So the operations side, project managers, superintendents, there's estimators, pre-con sides in there, but also even accounting, administrative, everybody that's involved in our business is represented in this group. And so it really helps us have a really diverse group of perspectives when we're looking at issues that we're facing. And so that group, essentially, we have different initiatives that we've targeted, kind of short-term and then long-term things. And what we do is we try to identify, essentially pain points within the business. And then we collectively as a group, we look for just solutions to try to resolve those pain points. And, again, that might be a change to the process, a modification of the process, or it might be just a whole new, innovative tech solution that we weren't considering before to try to solve those problems.
Yeah, so it's definitely a problem first approach, is what it sounds like, where you're not just bringing on a new tool for the sake of it. You're really starting with what is the problem we want to solve, and then applying either a product or an improved process or whatever it is to solve that underlying problem.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I think for us, that's really where we start, is what's the problem?
Yeah.
That's kind of where we start with our team, and we kind of work backwards from there. And, you mentioned that shiny toy syndrome. I think that really helps us kind of stay focused on what we're trying to achieve. Because to your point, I feel like every day I get, half a dozen, maybe more emails of a new software or a new technology or a new company that's out there, and, they're going to change the industry, and it's the best thing that's ever happened. And I think, has become one of the challenges of sort of the explosion in, content over the last 5+ years, is sort of, figuring out, where to put your attention and where to really invest your time. And for us, that always comes back to, well, what are we trying to solve here? And that's where kind of keeping that end game, kind of knowing, all right, what's our ultimate desired result by solving this problem? That's where we're trying to get. Okay, so now how do we get there? And that helps us, stay focused on the things that we're trying to achieve, and the solutions that we're trying to come up with, instead of just getting the squirrel, the distraction thing, from everything that pops up, like I said, on an almost daily basis now.
It's so true. That's exactly how we started our business, actually, because when we first started, Mallory and I, we had this gut instinct. That's really all it was, that there was an opportunity to bring more technology into the construction industry, but we really didn't know what that would be. Like, would it be an application for ordering materials, or for safety, or for this or that? We didn't know where that would end up. And we felt very strongly at the time that we couldn't just come up with a product on our own. We had to really, get in the shoes of people in the industry and understand what those pain points were. And then that would allow us to figure out what we actually wanted to solve for. And so that was really why we took very much a research-based approach of just talking to literally hundreds and hundreds of people in the industry, and starting to find all of these common themes with what people were saying. And we would really just ask open-ended questions around, what's the biggest pain point? What's the biggest frustration that you have every day? And then starting to see what the commonalities were. And of course, led us to workforce planning and all of that. But it was quite the process in just understanding all the challenges. If anything, the hardest part was having too many ideas and too many, great opportunities, and having to really figure out where to start. But I think starting with the problem first means that you're actually creating something that's going to add value, versus just something that looks good on the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that probably applies more to some of the short-term initiatives, that we're addressing. Some of the more long-term initiatives, that may be more of where you do some exploring and kind of kick the tires and such on some of the different options that are out there. Because, the other element to this group that we have is, we kind of want to stay aware of some of these emerging trends, that are coming out in the industry, and, at least have an idea of kind of what's out there, or maybe what's coming, what's on the horizon, so that as our business just continues to evolve, continues to grow and scale, that when we get to a point where we do need to make a change, we've already sort of vetted that out. We've figured out a solution that we feel like is going to work, so that as opposed to, getting to a point where you had your head buried in the sand, oh, everything works great, we don't need to look at anything, we're perfect. But then you get to a point where, you have to react, or you're having change compelled on you, which is, not a position that anybody wants to be in.
Definitely. And how do you actually bring some of these innovations or process improvements actually through and into fruition? I think that can be a hard thing for people either to wrap their heads around or to actually execute on, because there's lots of moving pieces. But do you have an example of just how you've actually implemented, a change like that, and kind of what that looked like?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. A recent item that we've implemented is the use of the Builder software, which is a closeout software. And kind of how that came to be is we actually, when we attended the Groundbreak conference back in 2019, we met Caleb and those guys just at the vendor booth. And, we hadn't heard of them before, but they were kind of telling us about their product, and it seemed like a good idea. But at the time, we kind of thought, we're okay with the way we're doing it. We haven't really had any major issues, but we'll kind of keep tabs on this. And one of the guys that came with us to that conference was a project engineer at the time, and obviously closeout typically falls back to the project engineer. So maybe it appealed to him a little bit more than some of the rest of us. But so he kind of took that back with them, and it really stuck with them. And then when the next project came up, he got in touch with them. He kind of took the initiative and got in touch with Builder and worked out to where he was able to do a trial version and use it to complete the closeout process on that project. And he did it, and he kind of kept track of his time and was able to sort of almost do an ROI analysis for us. And what we came out of that, we looked at the end product, we look at, how much more efficient and effective that process was by using this. And so we kind of came back, did an analysis, made a business case, and decided, wow, this is something that, is really going to be a game changer for us and could really actually be a differentiator for us in the market by starting to utilize this software. And so, once we kind of made that decision, we went into the implementation phase, training, and then pushed it out to our project teams. And a lot of them just started. It's very intuitive, the interface is fairly easy to pick up on. So maybe we got off easy on that one, but that's probably the most recent example of something where maybe we didn't even think we needed to change that process, but we ended up finding this really good solution, and it worked out really well. We kind of did a trial version, if you will, on a small scale to see how it would work. Decided based on the feedback and kind of the ROI that we kind of came up with, that it was going to make sense on a larger scale. And so we decided to go enterprise and push that out. And we looked at, is it going to work for us now, but not in the future? And we definitely made sure that that's a scalable solution, because, anytime you go enterprise with anything, we have to make sure that it's going to work, for the business now and for the foreseeable future. So.
Right. I love that you share that example, because it's such a good example of being able to start something within, a more closed off group. So in this case, the one project to start, and really using that as a testing ground before you make the change across the board. And then, gave that project team the opportunity to build that business case and present it internally, and then actually have some proof points before all of a sudden changing everything across the board. I think that's a great example, and it's actually a huge advantage in the construction industry. The fact that there is so much project-based innovation that can happen, it allows you to have those testing grounds and really empower some of those early adopters, like in this case, that one project engineer who wanted to be, that first person and, somewhat the guinea pig to test something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us, that's kind of how we look at a lot of these innovation type solutions is we kind of have to prove it first. We don't want to have people at just the executive level or just the C-suite, so to speak, look at something and say, oh yeah, this is going to be great. Everybody's going to love this. And then you go through this whole process of implementation and rolling it out, and then the actual end users, the guys and gals in the trenches that are going to be using it every day, hate it. So we take the opposite approach. We kind of have this really continuous feedback loop that we have with a lot of the folks in the trenches to see how well are these tools working, what could be done better, and particularly if we're looking at implementing new solutions. A lot of our technology partners, are open to trial versions, to make sure that you can kick the tires and that, things work the way you want them to work. And so we absolutely, before we, look at deploying something on an enterprise scale, we have to get it in the hands of the people that are going to use it day in and day out. And at the end of the day, they're really going to have the ultimate say, right? Because it's, with these solutions, we kind of look at them as they're two-part. They have to be efficient, but they also have to be effective, because you can have something that makes you maybe more efficient at something. So just as purely a percentage, or however you might be tracking that. But if being more efficient doesn't really do anything for you, it's not effective. And so for us, it really has to kind of meet both criteria. And that's something actually that we picked up on from Mike Rowe a couple of years ago at the Procore conference. He talked a lot about that, efficiency versus effectiveness. And that's something that's really stuck with us. And it's definitely something that applies to solutions, and making sure, again, that the end users and the people that are going to be using and touching these things every day, that we really have buy-in from them.
Yeah, that's a great point. We struggle with that as well, the efficiency versus effectiveness, because just saying that you saved time or were more efficient, as you say, that's not the full picture. And a lot of the time, the true ROI of an innovation goes so many layers deeper that it can be really hard to quantify, because there's so many, it's like a domino effect of how many different things are affected. This is a bit of a difficult question. This will be our last one because we're almost out of time, but have you had any way of actually being able to measure effectiveness within Descor on some of these new innovations?
Yeah, so it's kind of a combination of where there's hard, data that you can kind of measure and get metrics from. We try to do that whenever we can in the form of ROI. So like we'll do a poll and say, okay, how long was this task, or how long did this activity take you before we implemented this new solution? And then after we roll it out, we'll kind of revisit that, and we'll look at those numbers and make sure that we're getting, the efficiencies and effectiveness that we thought we were going to get. But sometimes sometimes it might not be as tangible as numbers, and it might be more of those intangibles, like, and the way we do that is we'll do an engagement survey with some of our end users. And essentially the question is, do you think this works better or not? Right. And because sometimes that's, down. Yeah. And sometimes just by keeping it simple that way, that really is sometimes the best gauge of whether that is an effective tool or not. Because, if somebody goes, I'll use the example of closeout again, where if somebody goes, I really did not like doing project closeouts before. Whereas now, even if we can get them to I don't mind it so much anymore, that's effective.
Yeah.
Because now we've just taken a task that person had to do on an everyday basis that they just dreaded and did not want to have to do. And now they at least, can do it with maybe a half smile on their face. So we would look at that as successful.
Definitely. That's a great note to end on. Keep it simple, and really just make sure that the people that are being involved are benefiting and seeing the value there, because otherwise, any innovation or change that you roll out is not going to come to fruition if you don't have that team buy-in. I think that's a great point. So thank you so much, Denton, for joining me today and allowing me to ask you all these questions around innovation and all the things that you at Descor are doing. So thanks for joining us, and we will be reconvening to do some Q&A. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.